Have a microphone plugged in now? Okay, can you hear me now? That worked out well. I'm glad I had the microphone turned on from the start. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. I'm glad that I plugged the microphone in and we're going live. So what I was saying is that I don't know about you, but I was pretty fortunate over the weekend that the Chinese rocket, the 10-story rocket that's falling to Earth in some place that nobody knows where it's going to land. I was lucky it didn't land on my house, and hopefully it didn't land on your house either, or land anywhere near your house. I mean, it's a giant rocket falling in some place that nobody knows where it's going to fall. It's obviously going to cause a lot of doom and distraction, death and destruction, I should say, carnage, which is my 8-year-old's favorite new word. And so but it didn't land on my house, and hopefully it didn't land on your house either. But unfortunately, over the last 24 hours, it sort of feels like it landed on Pitt basketball, or at the very least, the Pitt basketball fan base. And that's why we're firing up the live stream here on a Monday afternoon. Didn't expect to do that at 1 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, but when there's news and when things are significant enough, we do it. And obviously, there's two big news items for Pitt basketball right now. Obviously, there's two big negatives that have happened really in the last 24 hours. And I didn't think we would do a live stream yesterday after Reid committed to LSU. That's the 5-star center prospect we've talked about so much over the last few years. And certainly over the last few months, we've talked about Reid a lot and how important he is to Pitt and how significant he is and how much Jeff Capel needed to land him. And he didn't. He missed on him. Reid chose LSU. He committed yesterday. But I didn't think we needed to do a live stream. I thought, it's all right. We'll wait till Tuesday night. We'll get our we'll do the live stream then. We'll talk about it all then. But here we are on Monday morning, and Justin Champagnie's going to the NBA. He's going to stay in the NBA draft. He's not coming back to college. And I'll say right off the bat, that I wish Justin Champagnie the best. I don't know what his future is going to be. I don't know if he's going to get drafted. I don't know where he's going to get drafted. I don't know if he's going to go to Europe. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to provide for his family. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to follow his dreams and chase his dreams and do what he wants to do, have the success that he wants to have at the next level. I wish the best for him. I always thought he was a nice kid. And obviously he put in a lot of time and hard work at Pitt and played really well at Pitt. So I don't know what his future is going to be. I don't know. And it's not even really my place, I think, to say if Justin Champagnie made a good decision or not. Personally, you read stuff online and it doesn't look like he's considered to be a lottery pick. I'm not sure if he's considered to be a first-round pick. I guess he has time between now and the draft to work himself into that position. He was obviously a very good player at Pitt. He was obviously a very important player at Pitt. And he was obviously going to be a very important piece of the puzzle for Pitt in this upcoming 2021-22 season. And now he's gone. And, since he announced his intention, it was this morning, it was around 10 or 11, I forget exactly when Pitt put out the email, made the official announcement. His agency tweeted that he had signed with them, which was a bizarre move. Usually, almost all the time, when these kids announce that they're not coming back to college, you don't get it as a tweet from the agency, you get it as a tweet from the kid, which ultimately happened. Justin Champagnie ultimately posted on Instagram and posted on Twitter that he was going to be going to the NBA draft. And Pitt made an official press release, but it was very strange the way all those things went down. But in the last couple of hours since Champagnie made that announcement and made his decision known, I've been trying to think of what do I want to say about it? What do I want to say about Pitt losing Justin Champagnie? It sucks for Pitt to lose Justin Champagnie. You lose a guy who goes 20-20 in back-to-back games. You lose a guy who averages 18 and 11. You're going to struggle to replace him. And that stings a lot more than the loss of Reid on Sunday when Reid, the 5-star center prospect, committed to LSU. Even if you want to say, well, you were only going to get one more year out of Justin Champagnie, I don't really know that you were going to get more than that out of Reid. And inevitably, I mean, I think there's probably two ways you can go. You can look at what it means for Jeff Capel, and the program he has built, and maybe more relevantly, you can look at what it means for this upcoming 2021-22 season. What is Pitt going to be without Justin Champagnie? What are they going to be without Efton Reid? Not that Reid was ever part of the roster, but now that he's officially not going to be part of the roster, what are they going to be? And this is the biggest problem right now. They got 9 scholarship players set to be on the team. 9. Only 3 of them could you really call forwards. And those 3 are Max Madison, Noah Collier, and Dan Oladapo. I don't know what you do with that lineup. I don't know what you do. I don't know how you put 5 guys on the floor with that with those 3 as your forwards. Even if you play small, really small, like Will Jeffers at the 4 small, you're still playing Dan Oladapo at the 5, which is a small lineup. And this team, and I'm probably say this a few different times. I was like, well, I should wait to say this until later in the podcast. But I mean, I'm going to say it a bunch of times. I'm probably going to write it a bunch of times. I mean, this team was always shifting toward a guard-oriented focus this year. It was going to be driven by the backcourt. I think even with Justin Champagnie, he might have still ended up being the leading scorer, but the key was going to be the backcourt play. It was going to be Femi Odikale. It was going to be Nike Sabandi. It was going to be Ithio Horton. It was going to be Jamarius Burton, who came in as a transfer from Texas Tech. It was always going to be the case, and it still is, obviously, even more so without Champagnie, without Efton Reid joining the roster. But So you can be guard-oriented, and you can be driven by the backcourt, but you still need somebody to line up out there. You still need somebody else to play. And so, I mean, they go with this 4 guards, in rotation at the 1 and the 2 with Odikale and Sabandi and Horton and Burton. And then you got Will Jeffers and I guess Nate Santos playing the 3, and that's cool. But you still got those other 3 guys, Oladapo and Collier and Madison, to play the 4 and the 5. How's that going to work? I don't think Max Madison's ready yet. I don't know if Noah Collier's ready yet. And I mean, Madison really is probably the only true center on the team. Now, there's something to be said for the idea that what defines a true center in 2021 is not what defined a true center in 2012 or 2002 or 1992. There's something to be said for that. And I think you can play with a smaller center. You can play with a smaller guy out there. Right? Who's he going to be from this lineup? Who's going to be, and if it is, let's say it's Dan Oladapo. Let's say the transfer from Oakland comes in and he's good enough to be a starting center in the ACC, which we're making some leaps in that regard. But let's say he is, and I don't even know if that's Jeff Capel's plan at this point. I don't know what the plan is. But let's say he's good enough to do it. Who's your 4? Do you play small all season and go with 3 guards and Will Jeffers playing the 4? I think that lineup can score a little bit, but God, you're going to have some trouble defending. And I don't think you're going to win the rebounding battle in a single game. And when Pitt was actually good last year, when they played well, when they had success, the way they did it was by playing good defense and rebounding. And you're losing your best rebounder, and you already lost your best defensive player. It gets really challenging to see how this roster is going to come together. No beer for a 1 o'clock live stream. A little coffee, a little afternoon pickup. It's what everybody needs right now. I'll go into some of the comments and questions here. I mean, I got thoughts on thoughts, but Colin Tal asks, hey, Chris, where does Capel go from here? Any glimmer of hope for next season and beyond with him at Pitt? Like, where does he go from here? I mean, he's got to find a way to fill out this roster. And it's not about getting to 13 scholarship players or 12. It's not about a number there. It's about finding guys who can actually line up for you. You can't go into the season with these 3 forwards. You can't. And I don't know who you go out and find. It's got to be on the transfer market because the high school market is picked over. Unless you can find something in the international market. You know what I mean? Maybe you can find an international center who can come in and play, or an international forward who can come in and play. I don't know if you want to try and go find a guy in the 2022 class and get him to reclassify to the 2021 and come in as not just a freshman looking to play major minutes in the front court, but as a presumably young freshman. A guy who reclassified from, like I say, being a junior and leaving after his junior year of high school. And I don't even know if you could, I mean, I guess you might have some opportunities to find guys like that, but I don't think you want to bring them into play in the front court in the ACC, the kind of minutes that these forwards are going to have to play. So I think you're going to have to hit the transfer market. That's where it's going to have to happen, because I don't know what other options you have at this point. Again, unless you've got a line on somebody internationally, you've got to fill these spots. 1 through 3, I feel pretty good about, actually. I should say okay, borderline pretty good about. I like Femi Odikali. Yeah, it's a small sample size from last year, but I like him. I think he's a good player. I think he can be a good point guard for this team. I think Nike Sabandi took some time to get his legs under him, so to speak, and get comfortable playing in the ACC. But I think by the end of the year, he's playing really well. Ethiel Horton, he's mercurial, I guess. Mercurial Ethiel is the best way I would say it. But I can't rule out him having a better year this year than he did last year. And I think Burton will add some toughness, maybe a little bit of defense, and maybe a little bit of leadership as an older guy who's been around and played college basketball for a while. I like those guards. And I've said before, I really think that Will Jeffers can be in line for a really good season, for a big season. He's another guy that I think showed a lot of flashes. I shouldn't say a lot, but showed flashes throughout the season, particularly down the stretch. And I think, you could just see how smooth of an athlete he is. You could see what he can do on the court when he gets comfortable and when he settles in. So I like the 4 guards. I like Jeffers a lot. I think Santos, if you bring him in, he comes off the bench, he hits a few threes. You know what I mean? That would be the ideal scenario. I don't think that's going to happen every game, but you bring him off the bench to play backup minutes, because you're not going to need to split the 40 minutes between Jeffers and Santos. I think you're going to have 3 guard lineups out there with Odikali, Sabandi and Horton, or Sabandi and Burton, or some combination of those 3 where one of those guys is lining up at the 3. So you're not just looking, well, Jeffers has to play 25 and Santos has to play 15 or 30 and 10 or 20, anything like that. I think you're looking for minimal minutes for a guy coming off. I mean, look back at early Ronald Ramon years, Ashton Gibbs years, where these guys were really good shooters who came off the bench and try to make a few shots, try to give the offense a little bit of a spark. I feel good about those spots 1 through 3. But that's only 60% of your on-court lineup, right? And that other 40% is an area where Pitt really struggled last year. I mean, outside of Justin Champagnie. They didn't have a lot of depth. They didn't have a lot of talent. They didn't have a lot of they didn't have a lot of answers. And it showed in certain games. They got taken advantage of when there was a severe size disadvantage. The North Carolina game comes to mind. I think Virginia took advantage of a size, difference and was able to make Pitt pay for it. And I don't know how they rectify that this year. You don't need to go out and get a 7-footer, but you need some guys who can play there. And I would even go so far as to say this, okay? Yeah, it sucks that they missed out on Efton Reid. I mean, that's a big loss. The guy's a 5-star prospect, top 30 recruit in the country, probably going to play 1 year of college basketball and move on, you would assume. And if he doesn't play well enough and excel enough at LSU to be one and done, then he might be in the transfer portal. You might have a chance to get Efton Reid next year. And that's not a comment on Efton Reid. That's a comment on the state of college basketball. Because dig this idea, right? This is I'm sidetracking on a tangent, but think about this for a second. And I say this just as my own hypothesis, my own theory. This is not based on a conversation with anyone or insight into anyone's thinking or anything like that. What do you think the chances are that if Xavier Johnson did not transfer, Femi Odikali would still be on this roster? I don't think the chances are very high. I think there's a really good chance that if Xavier Johnson is coming back in 2021, Femi Odikali is not. And again, I could be completely wrong. He could stand up and say, "Are you kidding me, man? I'm going to be at Pitt for 4 years. I am not going anywhere. I love this place. I'm not leaving." But if you look around college basketball, the trend in college basketball is for someone like Femi Odikali to lit out. And if Efton Reid doesn't get the minutes he thinks he should have or he wants, or he's not using the way he wants to be used at LSU, you might get a second shot at him next year at this time. I was on a tangent. The heck was I even talking about? The center position. So you would like to have a guy like that. You would like to have you would like to have an Efton Reid. You would like to have a 5-star, a guy who's going to come in and make an instant impact as a big-time 7-foot player at the center position. But the reality is you don't need that in college basketball. It's great if you can get it, and it would have been great for Pitt if they could have landed Reid, but you don't need that. If you've got a strong backcourt, like I think Pitt does, they should be able to win a decent amount of games and have more success than they've had the last 3 years, the last 5 years, if they can just get a few guys to take up space. So, to a certain extent. And I'm oversimplifying it here, but a Gary McGee would do wonders for this team. A second half of his career, Gary McGee. A guy who can rebound okay, not really counted on for much in the way of points beyond maybe 6 or 7 or 8 points a game, and can, just make it a little bit difficult to go to the rim. A little bit difficult to drive to the basket. That's the kind of player they could use. If they could get John Hughley back, that would be pretty good. Don't you think? Let's say that. If John Hughley can come back to this roster, I feel a lot better about what it looks like for next year. Still not deep enough in the front court. But I feel a lot better about how they look. If they could get John Hughley back, and it's not about what they could do to get John Hughley back, it's what John Hughley can do to get his legal situation resolved. But you have those guards. You got your situation at the 3 that you kind of you mix and match there. You get Oladapo playing at the 4, presumably, I guess, with Collier behind him. And you get Hughley playing at the 5. That's a competent lineup. That's a lineup that can play in the ACC. I don't know if they're not gonna go 15-5. I don't know if they're gonna go 12-8. I think right now you're shooting for 10-10. But that's a competent ACC lineup if you can get him back. You're still not deep enough. And the lack of depth in the front court is going to hurt you. It's going to cost you games when guys get hurt or guys get into foul trouble. There's no question about that. And that's why even if they get Hughley back, they should still be going out and trying to get another transfer big. Just somebody to take up space. That's what they need. But I don't think they're that far away from a competent ACC lineup. It's just like last season. I mean, you look at last year, and we all talk about the collapse after the Duke game, and there's no question. They win like 2 games after that. It was incredible. How they just couldn't buy a win over those final, 11 games or something of the season after they beat Duke. But when you look at those 10 or 11 games or however much it was, they only really got blown out once. The Notre Dame game was an embarrassment. They weren't even close. It was a disaster. Every other game, and Jeff Capel made this point, and it's true when you go back and look at the games, 3-4 minutes to go, they're 1 possession away. They're right in the mix of the game. They just couldn't close. They couldn't they couldn't get it done at the end. And so, I don't feel like this is a team that is going to go 0-20. I don't think they're going to be lucky to win 3 games. I like this backcourt a lot. They need someone to play the 5. John Hughley can make a world of difference for this team. Failing that, and maybe even in addition to that, they find 1 or 2 big bodies in the transfer portal. And I don't know who those guys are, but there's 1,500 guys out there. You got to be able to find someone who can play that position. And it's not going to be great. And like I say, it's going to cost you some games. You're not going to win the ACC. But you can compete. You can continue to improve. And somebody else made this point that, Pitt has improved its record every year under Jeff Capel. Its winning percentage year to year has gotten better in conference games every season under Capel. If they want to keep that trend up, they've got to find someone who can play under the basket. I don't know who that's going to be. And I don't know where they're going to get him. I mean, they have to get him from the transfer portal, it seems to me. All right, let's see here. What else are people saying? Adam Brandt says, I think that getting another big man is clearly still the priority. Any chance that Pitt is going to be able to get back in with some of those 5s they missed on previously? I don't know. I don't know who they're going to find. And there's been a lot of talk, too, about the strategy, the approach of focusing all efforts on Efton Reid, not taking somebody else, not having backup options. And I have a few thoughts on that. I mean, to some extent, there's some truth to it. I think the timing very much hurt Pitt in this situation. All right, because it wasn't like Efton Reid was their main priority and he committed to LSU in November, where you would still have 4 months to try and find another high school center. Efton Reid didn't even commit to LSU in the spring, in April. He waited until May to turn down Pitt, which left Pitt holding the bag, so to speak, which is a really poor euphemism to use in this particular instance. He left Pitt hanging. And that's not, I shouldn't say that in that way. It makes it sound like, it's his fault for stringing them along. I mean, they recruited him. He liked them. There's strong relationships there. But when he finally did commit to a different school, there aren't a lot of options left out there. There aren't a lot of options for Pitt to pursue in the high school ranks. And so the idea of having backup options, having plan B if you don't get Reid, is a little tougher to do when you get to this point in the process. You needed to cultivate those backup options earlier along. But for that to work, you also needed Reid to make his decision earlier. So you could have had in January, you could have 5 guys on standby that you could, felt reasonable that you could close at least one of them if you lost Reid. All right, that works. But by the time you get to April, those 5 guys are probably going to pick other schools. They're not sitting around waiting for Pitt to call. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that was or wasn't the case with Jeff Cable. I'm just saying that once you get to May, when you're recruiting high school kids, it's pretty hard to have that backup plan. It's pretty hard to have that plan B. And if you focused all on one guy, it's hard to give yourself an out or leave yourself an opportunity to find someone to fill that spot if you miss on the guy you've been really targeting. What Pitt really needed, obviously the thing Pitt really needed was to land Efton Reid. Failing that, they needed Reid to commit to another school as soon as possible so they could put in the effort and put in the time and put in the work and the resources on other guys and then ideally get one by mid-April. That wasn't the case. So it's going to have to be a transfer. I think it's going to have to be multiple transfers. And here is where I will sort of concede the point on the lack of a plan B or a backup. They already should have had a transfer center because with the uncertainty around John Hughley and the uncertainty around Efton Reid and the fact that Max Madison is probably not going to be ready to go this year, you had to find another center. You had to know just between Hughley and Reid, the chances of both of those guys being on your roster this season were pretty low. You might get one, you might get the other, but getting both was going to be pretty tough. So you're going to need another center to play out there. You're going to need a backup, a guy who can take minutes. And so going to find someone, a big body from the transfer portal, it probably should have been done by this point. And it wasn't. And now it really needs to be done. And we'll see if it is. Let's scroll down through the questions, see what else people have to say. DJ Dennison, do JUCOs still exist? Junior college is weird. It's I can never really, and I know Pitt has had guys that have worked out from the junior college ranks. Jared Wilson Frame was a JUCO player, right? Ontario Lett is the one that people like to talk about a lot. They've had JUCO guys come in and have success. It's pretty hard to get them, I think. And we haven't seen this staff. They went and got Ryan Murphy out of the junior college ranks, who he had transferred there after playing in a mid-major. But it's something the coaches could look at. But if there was a good ACC-capable center in the junior college ranks, I think that he would probably already be spoken for or going to the NBA or something like that. I saw Boston College has just got a JUCO point guard. Those guys are out there. But I don't know if the center ranks are going to really provide the answer that you need. Now, was Rafael Maya, a big body who could stand under the basket? Yeah, to some extent. It didn't help him a whole lot. But maybe was Maya even a JUCO? I can't even remember now. Lose track of. There was also that really big kid. The kid that Ontario Let vouched for. Who was that? I can't remember that center name. Anyway, it's I think it's hard to get JUCOs. I don't think it's really an effective plan, and I don't know what you're really going to find out there. Matt asks the question, does Jeff Capel have to pull back the heavy pursuit of 5 stars? He seems to overall hurt the program on the close misses. Well, that's an interesting idea of, does Jeff Capel need to aim a little lower? Does he need to aim a little lower? If it comes down to the 5-star kid or a bust, you know what I mean? If like you can choose path A, and path A is you either get the 5-star or you get nobody, or path B being you get the 3-star, maybe the low 4-star on occasion. Maybe a little bit more reliably you get those guys, but they have a lower ceiling than the 5-star you're trying to get. Should Capel edge toward path B? Now, I don't think he has spent all of his time on those 5-star guys. There have been instances, obviously R.J. Davis last year, Efton Reed this year, where Capel sort of went all in and then missed on a guy. But I think, looking up, I want to look up something real quick. Yeah, he's still gotten Justin Champagnie. He's still... I can't find it. He got Femi Odikali. There are guys that he's gone after. He hasn't always been aiming high and just going for the 5 stars and missing them and ending up with nobody. He's gotten some of those middle guys. Nate Santos ends up on this roster this year. Like I say, Odikali is another one. Jeffers was a higher star guy, a 4-star guy, but Collier and a Madison were not. Hughley was a 4-star guy. So there are these instances where Capel has aimed high, missed, and ended up with kind of nothing. Although last year, he didn't get R.J. Davis, but he got Femi Odikali, which I don't know if that's a perfect trade-off, but it's still pretty, it's still, you ended up with a good player, right? So he's not exclusively going after 5 stars and missing. He's getting more of the mid-range guys, the mid-level players, the mid-level prospects. I don't know if you want to make that your sole focus. You need to find that blend of 4-star. You need to find that blend of those really high-end guys and then those guys kind of in the middle. And you're going to build a roster like Pitt with one of those really star players and then a bunch more sort of role players who develop into competent players in the ACC. Vince Pilata asks, Stallings or Capel, who is worse? That's not even a question, Vince. You can't really be asking that. I shouldn't say you can't. You can. You can ask anything you want. But I think you should know better than that. All right? Whatever happens this season, whatever happens next season, let's say Capel is, even gets 2 years after this. You know what I mean? I don't know how long he's going to be at Pitt. Whatever happens this year, next year, the year after that, if there comes a point in time where Pitt and Jeff Capel part ways and a new coach is brought in, that new coach will take over a program that is in much better shape than the one that Jeff Capel took over. In terms of the foundation of the program, in terms of the structure that's in place, the program that's in place. It was left in shambles by Capel's predecessor. Shambles. Okay? It wasn't building up from the ground floor. It was starting in the friggin' basement. Okay, and stuck in the basement under a pile of rubble and trying to claw your way out before you can even just start laying the foundation and rebuilding the house. Now, the results for the last 3 years have not been what you want them to be, Vince. I agree. They're not what anybody wants them to be, least of all Jeff Capel. But they have improved year after year in conference winning percentage. We can't pretend like they've just kept getting worse and worse. They started at the bottom, and they have slowly climbed up. Now, the reason we can't rest too much on the laurels of that progress is they have 6 guys from last year's team who are not returning, 6 guys who had eligibility left who are not returning. including the starting point guard, including the starting small forward, including the player who averaged a double-double and was an all-conference player and, All-American honorable mention. Not to mention your starting center. Not to mention your other top center. So there's been progress over the course of the last 3 seasons. But now Jeff Capel's facing his toughest test yet of taking over a team that is it's got a feeling of rebuilding. Even though they bring back this core of guards that I really like, overall there's a feeling of rebuilding to this season. They somehow, for some reason, hit the reset button. And I don't know if they really needed to, but they did. And now they're rebuilding this. Scrolling through, Royce Beacom asks, does Jeff Capel recruit anyone now in the transfer portal that he tried to recruit before? Does that depend on the players? In other words, does he give them a black mark for ignoring him before? I mean, I think you can't have hurt feelings in this business. So like I mentioned Royce, Efton Reid, right? It would not shock me at all if Efton Reid does not return to LSU next season. By which I mean he either goes to LSU this year, plays great as a freshman, he's one and done, he goes to the NBA, or he goes to LSU, doesn't play a whole lot this year, doesn't get the minutes he feels like he wants, or he's not used the way he wants to be used, and he decides to go in the transfer portal. I would say that out of the 3 possible outcomes, Efton Reid at LSU in 2022, Efton Reid heading in the NBA in 2022, Efton Reid in the transfer portal in 2022, I would take, if it's Efton Reid at LSU in 2022 versus the field, I would take the field. And again, not as a reflection on Efton Reid, but as a reflection just on the state of college basketball and the way things are working right now and the way things are going in college basketball. I would take the field. I would take Reid not being at LSU in 2022. And again, not because I think he's a bad kid or anything like that, just because that's the way it is in college sports. So anyway, if Efton Reid were to go into the transfer portal, Jeff Capel can't have any bad feelings about that. He can't have hurt feelings, because if Efton Reid can help him next season, he should go and try and get Efton Reid. If there's a guy that he recruited 2 years ago who's now in the transfer portal, and that guy strung Pitt along and then turned him down, but now that guy could help Pitt and he wants to come to Pitt, you can't have, it's not personal here. Shoot, if anything, it's gotten less personal over the last year. The last couple of years. It's not personal, and you can't take it personally. You need to go get the guys who can help you. So no, I don't think you I don't think you hold it against any of those kids, if that's what you're asking, Royce. Let's see here. Colin Towle, does anyone else on this team transfer? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're all pretty locked in. I think. So, that's been brought up. Is Femi Odikale, is he going to transfer now because they didn't get Reid and Champagnie left and the team might be bad or something like that? I think, and again, I can't speak for any individual player, but I think when players have transferred this year, and there's 1,500 of them, right? I would say the vast majority of them have probably transferred because they feel like they can get a better opportunity somewhere else. And that's not necessarily a better opportunity at the tournament or a better opportunity to Final Four or a better opportunity to conference championship, a better opportunity to showcase what they can do, a better opportunity for more minutes, a better opportunity to be used in a certain way. I think that's why the vast majority of guys have transferred. I don't think Xavier Johnson and Audis Toney and Gerald Drumgoole and Abdul Kareem Coulibaly and Terrell Brown transferred from Pitt because they were, pessimistic about the Panthers' chances this season. I don't think that was the case. I think they transferred for Pitt because they wanted a different situation. They wanted a different opportunity. When I put out that hypothetical before of, do you think that Femi Odikale would still be at Pitt this season if Xavier Johnson had not transferred? The reason that question is sort of legitimate, the reason that question actually has me kind of wondering, I really don't know. I wonder, is because guys are transferring to get exposure, to get themselves on the court, to get a lot of minutes, to play the position they want to play, to be used the way they want to be used. Why did Trey McGowens didn't leave Pitt because Pitt struggled 2 years ago and he didn't like the outlook for this past season. That's not why he left. He left because he wanted to be used in a different way. He wanted to play a different position. He wanted to play more minutes. And I think that's why guys are going. So, I mean, you look at this situation right now, you say, oh, man, I don't know what, like, the next comment in the chat, Eric Rogers says, hate to say it, Chris, but I see 3-17 next year. Like, the thing is, you look at the 9 guys who are on the roster. I mean, I guess we don't count Burton or Oladapo or Santos. So you look at the 6 guys who are returning scholarship players. And I would be surprised if any of them are looking at the situation and being like, oh, man, we might have a rough year coming up. I don't know. This might not be a good season for us. I might need to transfer now. I think they're looking at it, and if they feel like they've got an opportunity for playing time in a role they want to be in, then they're going to stick. And if they don't think they're going to get that opportunity, they're going to go. Gerald Drumgoole, I don't think he transferred because Pitt, the possibility that Efton Reed might go to LSU and Justin Champagnie might go to the NBA, so the team might not be good. I don't think that's why Gerald Drumgoole transferred. I don't think it's why Tony transferred or Brown or any of those guys. And so, does anyone else in this team transfer? I mean, Colin, at this point, we should not be surprised by anything. I don't think there's any outcome that should be a surprise. That was sort of my mantra over the weekend when, going back to Friday, going back a week ago, however far back you want to go, when people would ask me about Efton Reed, I would say, look, there's no outcome that would surprise me here. There's no outcome that would make me be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But, so I can't say I would be surprised by anything, but I don't think anybody else is going to leave this roster. I think these guys, the 6 returning scholarship players, are pretty locked in because I think they like their roles. I think they see the roles they're going to have. Obviously, a Madison is probably not going to be getting a ton of minutes, but I get the impression that he really likes being at Pitt and feels like the coaches are helping him develop, and he's willing to put in the work to get better. And maybe by next season, not this coming season, but next season, maybe he's ready to be a real contributor. But he's going to be the unicorn among them, though. I mean, really, and I said this to someone on Twitter yesterday, and this is the reality. I think if you're a college coach right now, you can't go into any recruiting situation. You can't approach any discussion or planning meeting for roster management or roster construction. You can't go into any of those things with the expectation that a guy is going to be on your roster more than 2 years. Now, some of this is a reaction to this offseason, which has been bananas. 1,500 guys in the transfer portal, guys leaving after 1 year, guys leaving after 2 years, guys leaving because they're not getting all the minutes they want as freshmen. And so it's extreme. And one of the biggest things I'm curious to see is, what does it look like next spring? Do we have 1,000 guys in the transfer portal again next spring? Do we have, is it 1,500 guys again? Is it more or is it less? Does it dial back a little bit? Do things calm down? How much of the transfer portal action this offseason was driven just by the chaos of COVID? I've seen a few people suggest that players, they just went through the last year with quarantines and COVID testing, and you can't go out and you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. All you can do is be around the team and take COVID tests and all this stuff. And you're just limited, and so it made them long for a change of scenery, and maybe that led to some of this, and maybe that's true, and maybe once we get past the COVID year, it won't be like that anymore. Maybe it'll be, it'll calm down a little bit. Maybe transfers will settle down. We won't see these kinds of numbers. Maybe. But I don't know. I kind of feel like the numbers are going to stay up. I kind of feel like we're going to see a bunch of transfers again next year. Maybe not as much as this year, but I feel like we're going to see a bunch. And as long as that's the case, as long as players enter every season thinking, if I'm not getting the minutes I want to get, if I'm not in the role I want to be playing, I'm going to leave, then you're going to have a lot of transfers. And the NCAA is facilitating this with the one-time, free transfer. Everybody gets a free transfer. Nobody has to sit out a year. And they're going to use it. Now, when they get to their next school and find out that they still have to continue working on their game, that the things that were keeping them off the court at their old school because they didn't play defense or they didn't rebound or they didn't pass or they didn't take good shots, and that's why they weren't getting as many minutes, or there was a better player on the team and that's why they weren't getting as many minutes, and they get to their next school and they find out the same things, now it's a little bit tougher. They, because if they transfer, they're going to have to sit out a year in a lot of cases. Pitt's hoping that's not the case with Jamarius Burton, obviously, that your second transfer will not necessarily cost you a year. But as long as this one-time free transfer is in place, like I say, I don't think you can expect, most of your guys to stay beyond 2 years. A lot of them will. It doesn't mean your roster is going to turn over every 2 years. But I don't think you can realistically plan and say, all right, so we're recruiting this guy now. We'll put him up for 4 years. Okay, we can count on him for 1, 2, 3, 4 of those years. All right. And then this guy's going to overlap for 2 of those. So we've got that. And, as you build your roster construction on the whiteboard, you can really only look ahead a year or two of what you're going to have and how the roster is going to come together. I really believe that. And that changes so much of, it changes so much of how you recruit. It changes how you approach transfers. It probably changes how you coach to some extent, although you would like it not to. And it changes it changes the sport of college basketball. This one-time free transfer thing, it's given players the freedom of movement. But that doesn't necessarily mean the players are going to make the best informed decisions. And I'm not one to carry water for the coaches. I'm not one to carry water for the NCAA. I'm not one to be against player movement. I think players should be able to go. When I was at Pitt, if I wanted to change colleges, move to a different area, I could have done it. Nobody was going to restrict me from doing anything I wanted to do. Maybe some credits wouldn't transfer or something like that. And so I'm all for player movement. I'm all for player independence. But just because the players will have the opportunity to move and take a free transfer and not have to sit out a year doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make the best decisions. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make the most informed decisions. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people who are encouraging them to look around, to transfer, to go to a different school, have their best interests in mind or are the best people to be giving them advice. And I hate to paint with a broad brush, but when you see 1,500 guys in the transfer portal, somebody's getting bad advice. Somebody's being told, you should be playing more than you are. Why aren't you starting? Why aren't you getting those minutes? Why aren't you playing now? Why aren't you playing now? Why aren't you taking that shot? Why isn't he passing to you? Why is coach benching you? Why is coach playing him? You hear some of that talk, and then, or you have that breakout game. You have that time where a guy has a huge game, and now you could be doing this all the time. Why aren't you doing that every game? Why aren't you getting the opportunities to do that every game? And again, I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but when you have this many guys transferring, you tell me what it is. It's guys who think they could be getting a better opportunity somewhere else. And some of them, it's going to work out. Some of them, it's going to be really good. You know what I mean? They're either, stuck at a mid-major program when they have better talent than that, or they're not getting the opportunity that they think they should get at a high-major program, and so they move and they show what they can do, and it all works out, and it's going to be great. I would wager, as we sit here on May 10th, 2021, Diez de Mayo, that is not going to be the case for the majority of people, for the majority of guys who transfer. I would wager that the majority of guys who transfer, I would wager that the majority of guys who are in the transfer portal right now either don't find a school to transfer to, or they do, and they end up in just as lousy a situation as the one they left. And they find out that it wasn't really about not getting opportunities, it was about not earning opportunities. And I'm on a soapbox here about this, but this is the reality of where college basketball is right now. This is what college basketball is. You go in, this is what it is for right now. You go to college, and if you're not the man, you go somewhere else to find somewhere where you can be the man. And I guess, like I said, I'm all for player movement. I'm all for player freedom. I'm all for these guys having the opportunity to seek out their best fortune. I just don't know if it's going to work out for everybody. We're way off topic. We sat down here to talk about Justin Champagnie and Efton Reid, and what are we talking about? Kent Nicholson says, is there anything to make you think they're going to be pretty good in a couple years? I don't see it. Well, that's kind of what I was saying, Kent, is that I don't know. What would you look at right now? Like, what would be the data you'd be consulting to even determine what you think Pitt is going to be in a couple years? Like, Justin Champagnie comes back. Is he going to be here in a couple years? No. Efton Reid, if he commits to Pitt, would he be here in a couple years? Any of these guys. You think about the transfers they lost. Johnson, Toney, Brown, would not even have eligibility left in a couple years. Koulibaly, I guess, he was a sophomore this year, and in theory, a couple years from now would be 2 years, he would be a senior. I don't think you can really project, boy, this team is going to be dynamite in 2023. I don't. I don't even know. You don't even know what the roster is going to look like in 22-23. It's not like football. Football, absolutely, there's a transfer, surge. The transfer portal is full of football players. There's no question about it. But it's not anything close to this. And we still see guys in football going in for 4 years, 3 years, 5 years. And part of that is due to the NFL saying you can't come out until 3 years. But part of it is that there's still an understanding of growing, developing over time. And maybe it's more about the NFL having a rule that you can't come out until 3 years. But I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be in a couple years. You say, I don't see it. That's right. We don't see it because I don't know what there is to see. Aaron Lake says, what are your thoughts on the coaching staff? Do you think at this point the staff should remain unchanged or Capel should try to shake things up? You go on the results, right? And the reality is, and I'll sort of say what I said 2018 with Sean Watson, that, as the offensive coordinator. I never like to say a guy should be fired. It's just like a personal thing. I just, I would hate if someone was out there publicly saying I should lose my job. And there have been a few who have. And so I'm not really one to say this guy should be out of work. This guy should be fired. This guy should not have a job. When we're talking about things like coaching sports, if it's a job of fairly more consequence, then yeah, maybe public safety or something like that. Yeah, I might have an opinion on it. And certainly I vote for our elected officials, which in its own way is a manner of saying this guy should not have a job. But I don't really like to say a guy should be fired. What I'll say is that you look at the results, all right? And you look at the production. You look at the performance. And so I looked back in 2018. I looked at what Sean Watson was doing with Pitt's offense and saying, these are the kind of numbers that get guys fired. And ultimately, he got fired. 2 years later, Mark Whipple put up similar numbers in a different way, but similar numbers, and he's back for another year. But that's another conversation altogether. The basketball staff, you look at the results, right? So, and the results, they missed on Efton Reid. Couldn't convince Justin Champagnie to stay, but I'm not looking at Champagnie's departure as a knock on the staff for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think they were trying to recruit him to stay. They shouldn't be trying to recruit him to stay. I think if you're Jeff Capel and you're the staff and you truly care about your players, you care about Justin Champagnie, and I believe that they do, then your job and your goal was to provide Champagnie with as much information as you can. You want him to make the best decision for himself. You'd love to have him back. There's no question about it. You want him on the roster. He's a great player. He was your best player, right off the bat. And so you want him back. There's no doubt. But you ultimately want him to do what's best for him, and I think you're happy for him either way. You're happy if he wants to come back because it'd be great to spend another year with him. And if he goes, you're happy for him. You wish him the best luck. And I don't think, and then the second part of that, of why I don't hold Justin Champagnie going to the NBA, why I don't hold that against Capel and the staff, they developed him. You have to give them credit for that, right? What was Champagnie's offer sheet? He was a 3-star recruit. And he came in and he ends up, averaging a double-double in the ACC. He goes 20-20 twice. He's first-team all-conference player. So as we talk about the staff, I don't. So, Champagnie, I don't hold it against him. Reid, yeah, you lost out on that recruit. You know what I mean? You lost out on Efton Reid. You got Will Jeffress. You got John Hughley, who were 4-star guys. You managed to do some really good recruiting that first month when you got to Pitt. Getting Johnson and Tony McGowan's was some good recruiting scores. Odekali seems like a nice find. Koulibaly's a decent player. I think it would have been interesting to see what he could develop in here over time. But then the on-court results, they're not what they should be. The thing I've said all along, though, and the thing I always say when it comes to coaching staff questions or, concerns about the staff, should a guy be fired, should a head coach make changes, is, the head coach understands his job. The head coach's job is to build the program and position the program for success. And he has to staff, he has to, build his staff with people he believes can contribute to that. And so a lot of people say, Heather Lyke, why haven't you told Jeff Capel to fire this guy, fire that guy? Why didn't you tell Pat Narduzzi to fire this guy, fire that guy? I don't think that's the director of athletics position. I don't think it should be the director of athletics position. I think the director of athletics hires the head coach, supports the head coach, and allows the head coach to make decisions on his program and what his program needs. And that is kind of how it should be. And so Capel has to sit back and look and say, all right, we're not where we need to be, not where we want to be. We haven't gotten some of the recruits we wanted, haven't gotten some of the transfers we wanted, haven't won as many games as we wanted. Where does that fall? Where's the fault for that? Could changing my staff change the outcomes? And to this point, Capel has decided that no, that's not the problem. And I'm not really sure that I see anything changing on that front this offseason. I think this staff might be in place for another year, for better or for worse. But I think that's, you let the head coach build his staff to, and then either win with it or lose with it. Somebody pointed out, I mentioned Rafael Maya. He was not a junior college player. He transferred from Brown, and that is not, I had said maybe he was a JUCO. I forgot, but yeah, he transferred from Brown. Didn't really matter either way. Eric Bruno says the staff is pretty concerning when it comes to recruiting. I'm not so sure Jeff will make changes. If he doesn't, do you see the administration sticking with Jeff Capel past this coming season? So there's, when it comes to the athletic department, Heather Lyke, Jeff Capel, and that dynamic, I think what it comes down to is Heather Lyke knows where the program was before Jeff Capel was hired. She knows the state of things. She knows what Jeff Capel walked into. She knows what Jeff Capel inherited. And so she can also see from her side, which is not the side we see. We don't see what, the nuts and bolts of the program. And she can see the nuts and bolts of the program and make a determination of whether or not things are being built. The record is not what the record does not show progress. Aside, like I said, winning percentage in the conference games improving every year. But the record does not show the kind of progress you would like to see over 3 years. The recruiting mostly doesn't. There have been some big misses. There have also been some, like I said, Jefferson, Hughley were 4-star guys. Champagnie was an obvious find. Odekali is a nice find. A good find, I would say. And so Heather Lyke needs to look at the nuts and bolts of it and see how the program has progressed over the last 3 years in terms of building a program. This season, we'll see if the results improve. And if they don't, we'll see what level they don't improve, how severe the fall is. And then, Heather Lyke will have to look at it and make a decision. I don't know. I don't know what it would take this year to get Jeff Capel fired after this coming season. I kind of don't think it happens. I think he's got 2 more years here, but we'll see. Michael B. asks, if Efton Reid had chosen Pitt, would Justin Champagnie have thought more about returning? I have no idea. I would guess no. Because again, I don't think it's about team success. I don't think Justin Champagnie left because he believed the team would struggle. I don't think he was sitting back saying, well, if they get this Efton Reid kid, I'm coming back. But if they don't get him, I'm taking the money and going to the NBA. I think his decision was probably based more on where he feels he is in terms of his readiness to be a pro prospect and what he, what he would benefit from coming back. And if he ultimately decided that he thinks it would be better for him to go, than I think he chose. And I think it's more about his development and where he sees himself as a pro prospect rather than, what a high school kid decided to do. Eric Bruno says, my thoughts on this staff is it's year 4 coming up, and there seems to be a problem between Jeff and his staff landing kids, especially at the 5 spot. I think their recruiting has been okay in different areas. They've just missed on some key guys, but they've also, I think they've landed some good players. They just, like I say, they've got to, they haven't gotten all of the ones they've wanted, and they haven't gotten all the ones they've needed. And there's a certain amount of bridging the gap when you take over a program that's in the state that Pitt basketball was, where you're going to have to kind of get the guys you can, coach them like crazy, and get lucky to get enough wins to start building some momentum on the court, building some on-court success and some momentum with that success. And to get you into a position where you can start maybe landing some of the more high-profile guys. You have to find a way to bridge that gap, and they haven't really done a great job of that for whatever reason. William Richter says, here's the reality. When we moved to the ACC from the Big East, changed the landscape for Pitt basketball. They lost their identity. We need to go for toughness mentally and 3-year and beyond players. Yeah, look, hey, man, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying there, William. I think that the things that defined Pitt basketball when it was really good in the 2000s, the toughness, the tenacity, the togetherness, those things are hard to find. And I don't know if Pitt has had enough of them over the years. I don't think they had enough of it this past year. I think at times they had toughness. At times they had tenacity. At times they had togetherness, but not enough. And I think when they ran into adversity, whatever togetherness they had kind of fell apart. And they weren't enough of a family. Look, I mean, we all know that phrase, we got. Like, that wasn't just lip service. They didn't put it on a shirt first and then adopt it as a mantra. It was a mantra for a long time before it ended up on a T-shirt or on the great Mike Lowenstein book. That's the kind of mentality this team needs to have, because you're not going to get a team full of McDonald's All-Americans. That you can't. You're not going to have that kind of team that can just out-talent everyone. But if you play together, if you really are a team, if you really are a family, if you really are all you got, and you play tough and you play hard, you can win a bunch of games. You might not make the Final Four every year, but you can win a bunch of games because we've seen them do it. And yeah, they're in the ACC. They're not in the Big East. And it's 2021. It's not 2003. I understand that. But those elements can still go a long way. Can you find the right players who are willing to not only buy into that, but buy into it for 3 years or 4 years? That's the really tough part. That's the really hard thing, is finding those guys who are going to be willing to stick around. Let's see here. Pitt Parade says, how long would Efton Reid have stayed at Pitt? Would 1 year have helped Jeff Capel in the program? I don't know. It depends on how good he is. You know what I mean? If he came in and lit the world on fire, he's probably if he came in and did what you hoped he would do and filled the role you would hope he would fill, then yeah, he's probably a one and done guy. I don't see him I don't see Efton Reid coming to Pitt with the current state of the roster they have and producing a stat line that's any less than what Steven Adams did, and Adams left after 1 year. So we're only going to get Efton Reid for 1 year, but that could have been a key piece to this roster because, like I said, I think the backcourt is solid, maybe even pretty good on this team. And I like the wings. It's just getting, that piece to fill the center position. And getting an impact player like Reid would have gone a long way. Pitt Parade, does resetting the program now make for a better foundation than what they had when Jeff Capel arrived? Not sure about that. I think it does. I don't know if it will or not. I don't know what's going to end up happening, but I do think, look, it was really bad when Kevin Stallings left. And it's not just about going 0-18. It's about the complete operation of the program. It was a disaster. Okay? Beyond even what we saw, and what we all saw was pretty significantly bad. And so whatever happens here, I don't think it's going to be worse than what happened then. That's my opinion. All right, final comment here. Doug Woods says, can't put the cart in front of the horse. You need to develop 3 stars first, then chase the 5 stars. The best teams right now in the ACC are Virginia and Florida State, both built on 3 stars in a system. That can be replicated. Recruiting like Duke cannot. I think you're mostly right there. I don't know if Virginia and Florida State are entirely 3 stars. I think they've stepped it up over the years, which I think Pitt would ultimately like to be able to do too if they can. Start building some success. I think they can start stepping that recruiting up. But yeah, look, if you are a program like Pitt, though, that's not going to get the blue chip kids every year, that's not going to get the McDonald's All-Americans every year, then you're going to have to get guys and develop guys. But that's where it gets complicated, is because how many guys that you bring in to develop are going to stay, or you're going to lose them. And that's what's tricky. That's the really difficult side of college basketball right now. It's the difficult side of recruiting. Obviously, Jeff Capel is going to have some challenges this year without Justin Champagnie, but he's got a backcourt. You got to find a guy in the transfer portal. You have to find a center or two. You have to get a couple big bodies who can come in and take up some space. And it's not going to win you 20 games, but you can get closer to it than you've been so far. All right, this was supposed to be about a 20-minute, half-hour podcast. We ended up going a whole hour, so this might be your podcast for the week. For everybody who tuned in on the live stream, I really appreciate it. Make sure you check out the website. We'll have lots of content there breaking down this Justin Champagnie decision and where Pitt basketball goes from here. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the website. Make sure you go check them out. Check us out, because we're reporting on Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting, keeping an eye on the soccer team, keeping an eye on volleyball, baseball. There's a lot of things happening all over the place in Pitt. You may be really down about Pitt basketball. Check out the baseball team. Check out the soccer team. Go review what the volleyball team did. They've had some success. The men's soccer, I think, is playing right now as we're doing this podcast, right? So that's, they're all doing really well. There are good things happening in Pitt sports, and certainly when we get to June, I think there'll be some more football recruiting action as well. So things are going to get pretty interesting there. Yeah, this is our podcast for the week. I think we're gonna do that. So don't go looking for a new episode tomorrow, because we've talked through a lot of things here on a Monday afternoon. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. So thanks again for jumping on the live stream. Thanks for listening to the podcast through the week. Make sure you check out the website Panther-Lair.com, and we will talk to you again. This Saturday morning, 8 a.m. the Panthers Insider Show. I'm sure we'll have more thoughts about Efton Reid, Justin Champagnie, and all of that. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great rest of the week. I mean, look, it's only Monday, right? So enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Just did an hour podcast.